Hey everybody, what is going on? Good afternoon. Hope you guys are still doing well on this Thursday. And I want to talk a little bit about some comments that were made yesterday by the head ball coach in Seattle. Currently a guy on top of the world, somebody who just won a Super Bowl in his second season as a head coach. And there's definitely a certain level of trust that I think we all have in Mike Macdonald right now as Seahawks fans. I think we're definitely in a place where we feel like he can do no wrong because the results have been so incredibly good over these first 2 years. So on some level, he could say anything and we'd probably eat it up. But I want to talk a little bit about this because it does kind of bring a certain something into focus when you're talking about this Seahawks team. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. So Mike Macdonald was asked about other teams in the NFC West yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. It might have been the day before, but for the most part, people were talking about this yesterday. So to briefly sum it up here, and this article on PFT does a pretty good job running through it. The two primary rivals for the Seahawks in the NFC West are, of course, the 49ers and the Rams. And both those teams did quite a bit this offseason to try to improve their chances of winning the division and ultimately winning the Super Bowl. The 49ers, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Odigizua, which, by the way, underrated pickup. They brought back Dre Greenlaw. Rams, we all know what they've been up to. McDuffie, Jalen Watson, now Myles Garrett. Maybe Aaron Donald. We'll see what happens there. I made a video about that yesterday. So there's a lot of action going on with those two teams. And those were two teams that were, I mean, on some level close last year, right? I understand that as much as we did beat the 49ers by 35 points in the postseason, they were a week 18 win away from getting the number one seed. So that is still a credible team at the end of the day, even if we kind of executed them in the postseason. And of course, the Rams, I don't think we need to go into detail there. So this is a very intense race to the top in the division. And from an objective standpoint, you look at what the Seahawks did this offseason, it's not on the same level in terms of trying to improve. So it's hard to not take note of that. And as somebody that makes countless videos on this YouTube channel talking about the Seahawks and everything about them, I have noted that this Seahawks team has not taken swings the way these teams have. And that's even true outside the division. The Patriots add A.J. Brown. The Broncos add Jalen Waddle. So there's some other moves that have happened with some of the contending or pseudo-contending teams that should make them better. And Seattle mostly lost players from last year, like K9, like Kobe Bryant, and are replacing them with cheaper players and rookies. So that's a lot to take in. But Mike Macdonald is sticking to the same narrative that he so famously started shortly after the NFC title game when he said that I don't care. So through it all, through all the stuff that's happened this offseason, Mike Macdonald still does not care. If you start worrying about what everyone else is doing, it's just mentally taxing. It's so much easier if you don't. Ultimately, he's worried about the Seahawks being the best version of themselves. If you like sports, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using the Prize Picks app, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, and obviously we are now firmly into the NFL offseason, so we're all about baseball. We got some basketball, we got some hockey, whatever it is you like. Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. Definitely make sure to use the promo code HMA. Prize Picks is hooking up users with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you use that promo code, that is HMA. I've had a great time on Prize Picks so far, so definitely get on over to it, check it out, and make sure to get your lineups. And don't forget about Team Picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So download the app now, use HMA, and get on over to Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. So, for anybody who was wondering, despite everything going on, Mike Macdonald still does not care. And this is obviously, I mean, I don't know what else he would say. I know that some people would say, well, what's he going to say? Yeah, I care. Those teams are really dangerous and scary and intimidating. Of course, he's going to say something like this. I understand that. But when you've done what Macdonald has done so far in his NFL career, and Macdonald is on some fast track to legendary status. Like, there are very few coaches in NFL history that have gotten off to the start that Macdonald has. Everything you do and say just feels a little bit heavier. So I cannot help but look at this and think about some of the things that have happened this offseason and think about the right path for this team. When the Rams made their Myles Garrett trade, one of the videos that I made in the immediate aftermath of that, because that was such a massive blockbuster deal, I asked, should the Seahawks change their plans and overextend themselves to try to keep up, to try to compete? And I did say there was some reason to believe the team could do that, and maybe they should do that. And I still stand by that. I'm not saying it's completely baseless, but I presented the other side of it as well. I presented the other side that basically said, look, you've got to worry about yourself. You've got to control what you can control. And if you overextend yourself, I mean, there's a reason why they call it overextending, right? There's a reason why it's implied to be a bad thing, because it often doesn't work out. So I look at this Seahawks team right now and I ask myself, what would a swing for the fences offseason look like? What would have been different about this offseason if the Seahawks decided to say, come hell or high water, we're going to do everything in our power to repeat this year, even if it screws the team up down the line? I think you probably pay K9. I think that's step number one. And then number two, I think you probably trade for Max Crosby and you give up more than 2 first-round picks to make that happen. And I look at those two moves and I think, yeah, you could have done that and it wouldn't have been terrible. I would not have strongly objected to that. But I can still look at it and say that probably isn't a great idea. And the important thing to keep in mind when you're talking about stuff like that, it doesn't guarantee anything. You can do those things. You could do those things and still do other things as well. You could throw a bunch of money at another edge rusher as well. You could go get somebody on the edge that is going to cost a lot of money on top of Max Crosby, move off of Uchenna Nwosu to kind of and look to basically replace him with a better player. You could have thrown a bunch of money at a second corner, the way the Rams did with Jalen Watson. We decided not to do that. You can do those things and still lose. Like, there's no button that a GM can push that is like, guarantee win the Super Bowl this year. And John Schneider isn't sitting there looking at that button and refusing to press it. So that is one thing to think about when you're looking at something like this. Because I understand the temptation, right? It's very tempting to look at this situation and go, hey, the 49ers are getting better. The Rams are getting better. We're not getting better. Why aren't we swinging for the fences here a little bit while our window is open? And that's a big reason why you don't, because you can end up in the exact same spot just with no flexibility. At least this way we have flexibility. But I think the main thing to keep in mind right now is to have a lot of trust in Mike Macdonald and John Schneider in surprising you in a positive way. What I mean by that is there is a lot of investment being made right now in this Seahawks team being able to get more out of their roster than it looks like they will, because their roster has taken a step back and other rosters in the division have taken a step forward. I don't know if those rosters have necessarily passed us. Like, I look at the 49ers roster, I still see a lot of problems. I'd still probably rather have our roster. But the Rams roster, at the very least, I would say you stack their players up next to our players. They probably have better talent and they have better ability over on that side. But you take a look at what Macdonald has done over the last 2 years, and I think one of the things that really stands out at a time like this, and the thing to really remember, is number 1, Drake Thomas, and number 2, Ty Okada. These are 2 nothing players that nobody knew anything about. They were both undrafted. They were both unheralded. They were both replacement level. Nobody was really thinking that much about them. And not only did Mike Macdonald turn them into starters on a Super Bowl team, he turned them into net positive players. Both of those guys provided net positive play for the Seahawks in 2025. So you're looking at this roster right now and you're thinking, okay, if we're going to repeat, because that's the goal, and this article mentions that, that's obviously our goal here. You might need Mike Macdonald to do that kind of stuff again, but he can do that. Those 2 guys are maybe the strongest examples, but there are other guys that I think that he has maximized. I think that on some level, you could say he even maximized somebody like a Tyrese Knight the previous year, when Tyrese Knight was a 4th-round pick that you didn't think was going to be ready to play as a rookie, but actually played pretty well. Maximizing DeMarcus Lawrence, who I know is a great player, but he had his best season rushing the passer in over half a decade in Seattle last year after an extended period of time where it looked like he was mostly just a run stopper. So you are making a bet on Mike Macdonald being the great equalizer, even when you lose players and other teams are adding players. That's clearly not a bad bet because he's already done it. He's already done it. I mean, you look at the Rams roster last year, you could argue that their roster was pretty comparable to our roster, right? You look at the talent up and down. They had the MVP, right? They had the MVP at quarterback. But nevertheless, we still came out on top. So what I'm trying to get at here is there is going to be a talent discrepancy between the Rams and every other team. And that's something that I've talked about earlier this offseason. I don't think there's any point in me saying otherwise. The Rams are loaded with individual player talent in a way that no other team is, and I think that includes the Seahawks. And that's with or without Aaron Donald, who I don't think really moves the needle that much when you're having this conversation. But at the end of the day, we have to look at what we have. And what we have is a coach who has proven he can get it done at the highest level, who has proven he can get the most out of some limited players that a lot of other people and a lot of other organizations overlooked. And he's going to have to do it again. He's going to have to do it again at some point this season. We're going to be turning to a guy that we don't know much about probably and asking him to step up and deliver. And he can do it. So Mike Macdonald still doesn't care. And at the end of the day, that's the right thing to do. Obviously, I toyed with the idea of doing other things. I toyed with the idea of maybe making a big move to try to counter the Myles Garrett move. Making a big move to counter the Mike Evans move. Other teams within the conference, you could also point to some stuff there. Like, I don't know about the Eagles, but the Eagles did make some acquisitions this offseason that I think are significant. Grenard. I know they lost A.J. Brown, but A.J. Brown wasn't really playing that well for them anyway. So you could have gone that way. But not caring is probably the right move right now. And hopefully we don't end up regretting not caring at the end of this season. We're focused on us. And given that we are the champions right now, we are on top. That's probably the right path to go. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Just wanted to talk about this a little bit here because I think it's pretty obvious at this point. Seattle is, with the possible exception of like a Jadeveon Clowney signing, the die is cast, and they're not going to try to keep up with the Joneses. And that can be frustrating, and we may end up regretting it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad decision. It's just a decision that does not guarantee success, which is true for every decision a team can make. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. And more stuff coming soon.